Hey, gang. Welcome to the Project Resurrection, the podcast. And I'm your host, Chaplain Sai Ali, aka the Chisel Chaplain. Our guest for this episode is a California native. She currently lives in the Tacoma, Washington area. She has a background in the service and hospitality industry. She's always felt the need and desire to find ways to be in service to others. Spirit-led, she felt a calling over her life in the direction of mentorship and life coaching, identifying all too well with the need for positive and influential role model members in the community. She founded Queen's Lead, a mentoring program committed to providing guidance to young women as they transition into adulthood. The program centers on recognizing the value of each young lady's individuality and is designed not only for the purposes of supporting them towards excelling academically, but in acting on their fullest potential in every aspect of their life. In correlation with Queen's Lead, she created and wrote a 10-month, 40-topic curriculum designed with the intent of other schools being able to utilize and implement this program with their own. Amongst this body of work, she is also in the process of writing her own autobiography, detailing true events that she experienced centered around a traumatic past relationship to which she almost didn't make it out. Constructed to be another teaching tool, her story is transparently being written to help women of all ages understand the importance of the relationships they choose, as well as the standards we are and need to be creating within ourselves, as well as those we are considering building a relationship with. Aside from her passion-fueled roles in mentoring and authorship, she is an established and successful real estate broker out of the Seattle-Tacoma area. With a niche for first-time buyers, she has successfully helped dozens of families obtain their goals of home ownership, with the anticipation that she will be helping hundreds more over the course of her career. Kicking off this procession at the start of the pandemic, her love and dedication in serving others is yet another catalyst in bringing this dream to life for so many individuals. When she's not working to help build up the lives and experience of others, she is spending her time in the role that she cherishes most, being a mother to her 12-year-old son, Donovan Jackson, aka DJ. Her future goal is to build Queen's Lead into a nationwide program that is implemented in schools across the country and ultimately become a public speaker, which I know she'll be dynamic, on a platform centered on coaching those of all ages. Welcome to the podcast, Miss Stacy Lollis.
Hey,
Welcome, baby. Welcome.
I'm like, okay.
Yes,
Love to
yes.
see this. I'm so
Oh,
blessed to even be here.
I'm so
So,
excited to have you on. We'll get into our relationship and how we met, but what a beautiful soul you are, and the fact that you are trying to be instrumental in shaping the lives of these young kids who desperately need mentorship. Outstanding. How you been?
I have been blessed. So, incredibly busy. Life is a juggle right now, but all good things, with real estate. It's going good. I have no complaints in that area. Mentorship also. Everything is a challenge, but I feel like it's worth it, in every area to really excel and really push as much as I can to help other people in any way that looks like. And so it's been good. I say all that to say it's been good. So
It is, and you're juggling. You're wearing a lot of hats. You're a mom to
yeah.
Donovan. You got the bumping real estate career. You got your mentorship program. How are you handling? It sounds like to me you're juggling everything perfectly. Or is that not the correct term to say it perfectly?
Nah, I think it's moments in life that teach you how important time blocking is. And so for me, I didn't come from the background of structure. I'm very, let's just do everything on the fly and
Sounds familiar.
procrastination. So anyway, long story short, it's allowing time blocking is allowing me to really excel in areas because I make sure that every day and then every week is strategically structured. And so it flows because I make sure it flows. And
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
but it's multifaceted passions. And so even though it's hard work, it's a different level of gratification, when you're even in the thicket of things and you're building up all of these things,
Right.
it's just different, having the impact and then knowing that the responses you're getting are coming from the most genuine places possible, even just seeing the
Right.
transitions, you know what I mean? And so
Absolutely.
it's it's what propels, but it's what, like, it keeps the motivation going,
Oh yeah,
every day. And so
absolutely. So you know what? Now it looks like I think we're on the other side. God willing, we're on the other side of this pandemic. And it seems like life as we know it is trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. You have restarted your program, and our guests should know that Stacy is a social media influencer. I didn't put that in the bio, but has like 20,000 followers. So everybody
it's not that
following
big,
you.
but
But you get, I thought it was big. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, it could be
it's getting
50,000.
it's I haven't I'm learning in life to kind of get back into things, but as I, get older and life kind of sets in, I have to take my own breaks. So a lot
Absolutely.
of my life is, yeah, I try to make sure that I'm putting out what I content and things like that, but I have to kind of mentally check myself in a lot of
Sure.
times. And that comes with no social media, you know what I mean? And so
Right,
I may kind
right.
of get on there from time to time to make sure I'm responding to those other
Yeah.
people who are on there who kind of need, but I try to make sure that I am balancing appropriately. So
Understood.
it's one of those things. I'm on a downside right now. I'm on a social media break so even if it's a couple days, a week, I just need to kind of recharge.
Oh,
So
I get that. I get that.
yeah.
Now, how did you get involved in youth mentorship? What kind of laid the tracks for you to get involved with these young ladies?
That was a God moment. So for me, personally, it was one of those things. I feel like when God is leading you to do something, he'll put this little something, kind of this little chip on your shoulder, right? I don't even want to call it chip because it's not a negative thing. It was like this little nudge, right? And so I could feel my spirit kind of wanting to get more involved in a different avenue of serving. And so, coming from service and hospitality, it's always been like, the food and beverage industry and, giving energy and those kind of things. But
Right,
it wasn't feeding my soul, and so I was kind of in
right,
this complacency sense of mind. And so it's like, okay, well, what do I do from here? Like, how do I bring my energy and my love for people and the light that I have to give? How do I expand on that? And so I was on social media and I'm like, how you kind of just scroll through your friends' posts and stuff like
right.
that. And I was following one of my guy friends, and he is in the realm of mentorship. And I kind of see his posts here and there, how the feed kind of works. And
Yeah,
every time I would see a post, it was like the nudge would pop up and it's like, you
right.
need to reach out to him. And of course, in my mind, and I'm like, you talk yourself out of it. I'm like, I don't even know this
Sure.
person. It's not really my friend, it's my Facebook friend. And
Right,
so it was kind of like, I would just kind of push it to the back. And so eventually the nudge got so great where it was like, okay, you got to just do it. Like, I don't know what this is. I don't know why I'm doing this, but let me just reach out,
right.
DM my friend and see kind of how he got started into this. And
Hmm.
so when I messaged him, he was like, funny story. I really don't bring anybody into my world. It's really just always been me. Every time I've tried with the two people, because he got jaded with the two people, he's like, I just don't
Right.
even try to mesh and mingle. And most people can't do it at the capacity, or they have different expectations and they get it
Sure.
and they're like, he's like, but I don't know. I just kind of want to bring you in to the school so we can just sit down, have a conversation. You can meet some of the admin, a few of the students, and then we'll just go from there.
Right.
And so that meeting, it really took off from there without him even, it was like the warm handoff. Like as soon as I got there, it was like everything kind of just flowed and played fast. And so we did like maybe two co-groups where I'm in a group, I'm watching him how he facilitates, I'm kind of chiming in here and there, but then it
Right.
was like, it moved fast. And so then I got, you had to sit down with the principal, and his whole nonchalant meeting was, oh, you want to start a girls group? That's cool. Like, do what you want with that. And I'm like,
Right. Right.
oh, cool. Okay, like no rules. All right, cool. That's great. And so it was one of those, but it really just like fell into my lap. And
Yeah.
so from there, having the blank slate, having like the no rules, I kind of just let my spirit lead me on what that looked like. And so structuring it originally, and I still do the same structuring now. I come into the school certain days a week and I do one-on-ones, because a lot of what you're building into when you're working with kids who are at such a disadvantage when it comes to whatever that may look like, academically, home life, emotional,
Right.
social, whatever that looks like. You have to build a relationship with them. You can't
Sure.
just come in and be like, hey, come to my group. They're gonna look at you like, who are you? Like,
Oh,
why
yes.
should I even come?
Yes,
Like, and even
absolutely.
then you have to still earn it. And so a lot of it is building those core relationships, but then we always have a group every week. So when there's
Yeah.
school, every Friday after school, we have a group. And so we'll talk about a topic from there that centers on different things that really don't get talked a lot about for women, you know what I mean? And so social pressures, whether that be body shaming, it just different things,
Right.
you know what I mean? And so things that really just don't get the highlights that are needed, but every young lady at some point will experience either in their own experiences or in the experiences of others. And so that's kind of how that even took place. And so it really was very God led. Like
Yes.
it was just one of those, okay, I followed the call. I listened to what God told me to do. And he took the reins on
Right.
that. And
Right.
it really just kind of morphed into something that I didn't even think it was going to be. I was just like, oh, I just was trying to see what was going on with my friend and how he got, and then it's like, boom, mentorship program.
Yeah.
So
So
it's,
it just materialized. God kind of walked you
yeah,
through that initial stage, and then you put that together as you went along.
yeah. Yeah,
Good.
that was, I
That's
mean, even the
awesome.
curriculum, all of it was just like, I don't know, it's one of those, you can only really describe it best as spirit led.
Right.
I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know a lot of times before I even do it, most times when I'm conscious of it, I pray over every one-on-one and every group because I don't want it to be me talking. I need to,
Sure.
whatever needs to be said, be said. And so even
Yes.
creating the curriculum, the second year being there, because it wasn't implemented the first year, it was something that I kind of built into.
Right.
Um, sometimes sometimes the topic of what you think you're going to talk about isn't the topic that needs to be talked about. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's just paying attention to intuition and what
Right.
the spirit is saying. It's really
Yeah.
all that it is for me.
Okay.
So
Exactly. Now, I know that you were rolling right along, and then the pandemic hit, and then the
mm,
quarantine was implemented. How did you deal with these young folks as we went into the pandemic and we went into the quarantine? I know that had to be a frustrating time for you because the access with your kids cut off at that point once the quarantine hit?
absolutely. Well, I did different things to still kind of have access to them, but with it being a school-based program that I was originally, creating, it's
Right.
in a high school. Once you don't have the dynamic of being able to be in the school,
Yeah.
you kind of are at the mercy of what the kids are going to do. And so I still did Zoom meetings. I
Okay.
still try to
Okay.
do Zooms, on every Friday if I could.
Right.
But it's different when you're not physically able to be in front of the kids. So when you're dealing with kids who
Right.
already struggle with accountability, they're not going to get on a Zoom with you and tell you all the ways that they've been bombing everything that they know they shouldn't have been
Right.
bombing. And
Right.
so it's like I'm just gonna dodge Stace. Like, and it's just one of those things. And so I would still reach out, I would still send text messages or try to do phone calls, even if I didn't get the response, just so that they
Right.
knew I'm still there, and so
Sure. Sure.
but very, very frustrating in a sense of not having the same accessibility. Also, too, going into this so unorthodox, a lot of what I was doing and creating this was all volunteer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so going into the realm of how I was trying to get into it, it was being able to track my data over time,
Sure.
prove the data working within, the formula and just the data and things like that I'm
Right.
providing and creating, and then sitting down with the district and pitching for the position and the platform to be more
Right.
solidified. And 2 months, 2.5 months shy from being able to have that meeting, COVID hit and wiped out all my
Right.
data. So not only
That's
was it
brutal.
just the kids who just having those relationships really just hindered in that way,
Right.
it was watching everything that I had built up to that point wash away
I just
with
just tough.
all the data. And
That's
so,
devastating.
yeah, it is what it is, but coming back into it, I still made sure that I, with my grads who were who are graduating. We still do barbecues. I still try to get them
Right.
together when I could and stuff like that. And so I still maintain communication with those who needed me. I'm always accessible. Doesn't matter. Like I make sure
Right.
all my kids have my number and my social media platforms. That way, if they need something, they can access me in real time. And so but it did. It took a huge toll. COVID kind of did a number. So
It did, for not just the mentorship programs, and probably for everything, but I think it's affected the children, the young people really
mhm.
hard, because I'm a part of this mentorship group here in the Pittsburgh area. And in talking with them now, almost to a person, and there might have been a few kids who were probably really loners to begin with, who didn't mind the isolation of being online and remote study and not having a crowd to interact with. But most of the kids, Stacy, that I mentor here in Pittsburgh were really devastated by the isolation. Is that the feedback you're getting with your young folks out there too?
Yeah, so I just started this program again. So we'll kind of start there.
Okay.
I just started it a little over a month ago. So I got
Okay.
asked finally by the school to have the program come back because there was such a need. And it was just like that, okay, like we know she's busy, but like we just gotta try, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
coming back into it, I always try to ask touch questions with students of, just to kind of see where the area they feel like is the most struggle.
Yeah.
And a lot of the answers were very common. And we'll kind of touch on that, but we'll also talk about just the dynamic coming into it after COVID for a lot of even freshmen, right? And so with personal struggles, one of the number one things that I heard was the socialization.
Right.
Their skills were gone. They didn't even
Ditto.
know how to be communicative. They didn't feel comfortable trying to be communicative. So of course, in that, you don't really have the friendship base because you don't really know how to build those friendships and
Right.
gain friends and try to, activate those conversations and things like that. And so that was a big one. But also just the female drama, you know what I mean? And so because I work with
Right.
young ladies, one of the biggest thing would be other young ladies. And so coming back into the programming this year, it's a whole different beast of the struggle. I don't even want to
Right.
call it struggle because it's not even the right word for it, but the need to have influential and pivotal leaders just to kind of help them because
Right.
my caseload not only doubled, but I'm working with students who are even more disadvantaged than the ones that I started with. And so it's kind of like, oh, this is great. Like,
Right. Right.
and so
Yeah.
before it was when I was going in and I was doing the programming, it was, okay, we're going to give you the top list of all of the students who struggle with, because I want a top tier. Like I want to
Sure.
know the ones who really need the love. I want to know the ones who are really got all the ODRs and
Right.
who really have all the attendance issues and who are always on the radar. I
Mhm.
want all of them. And I had all of them.
Yep.
Now the list is so great, I can only have the third tier. So the ones who are the highest risk, I can't even access or even
Wow,
think
Stacy.
about getting to the middle tier or even the lower level. And so, and think about the fact that that's doubled now in number, you know what I mean? And so I'm
Right.
like, I'm trying to literally come in and do all these different things with kids who coming straight from middle school, jumping right into high school.
Right.
And you've had a 2-year break
Yeah.
from not having any real contact, and then you're coming into high school.
That's a tough
That
transition.
my freshmen are the ones who are really struggling the most. They
Okay.
are the ones who are just like, they don't really, they're my top tier. Most of them are freshmen with the
Right.
ones who I really am helping. So it's been a challenge. It's been a real challenge, but kind of watching the dynamic of how things have played out with COVID for them, it's hard, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
it's, you can all you can do is just be there for them and really coach them as best you can.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just teaching them social emotional skills that would have naturally came if they had the same atmosphere as what a lot of other kids have had in past years. So
Absolutely. Now, I noticed when I started here in Pittsburgh, the depression, and there's two people that were responsible for inspiring me to get into youth mentorship, because I was concentrating, and I still, provide spiritual comfort to my cancer patients out there in the Pacific
mm,
Northwest. But my daughter, Sammy, when I started doing these YouTube videos and these TikTok channels. We'll talk about TikTok later because you and I never got to do our video. That's a whole nother
Sorry.
podcast.
As soon as you said it, I was like,
Yeah, yeah. But
ah.
Sammy told me, she was like, Dad, a lot of young people are following you. And I was really
Mm,
naive to the fact that young people were really struggling with depression and mental health. And then you watching you with your mentorship program out there, so between Sammy and you, I felt compelled when I got out here and I got the opportunity to go into a high school to do it. And I was just floored by the depressed state of these young people. And I am not afraid to be transparent. And you and I talked off air about making sure that we are transparent with them, because these young people size you up. As soon as you sit down with them, and you alluded to it, they're sizing you up to say, are you a friend or foe? So I've just figured right off the bat, I am going to let these kids know that I'm flawed. I struggled. I had my I had several of come to Jesus moments. I had a Glock 19 in my mouth in 2015. I am a suicide attempt survivor. And then you see the eyes, Stacy, on these kids, and that resonates with them to have an adult say, okay, and particularly a Black male, and I'm generationally, people of my generation never admitted or never were able to just be transparent and show your vulnerability. And it resonates with these young people. So then they're not afraid to come back. But the stories, Stacy, are just brutal. They're devastating what these young people are going through.
mhm. Yeah, that's similar on my side, but I think with a lot of my students, some of them will openly admit that they struggle with depression, but I think that a lot of them don't want to. I think they consider it to be a weakness, so they just don't say it. You know what I mean?
Right,
And so
right.
you kind of see it in them, but it's one of those, it's a tougher school I'm working in. And so a
Sure.
lot of them don't want to be in a group letting on vulnerabilities. You know what I mean? And so a lot
Interesting.
of them just don't, yeah. So a lot of them, it's not something so vocal with a lot of these females, but you do see some of them are open about it, but a lot of them kind of tapping into them again, you know what I mean? This
Right.
this go around and things like that. Um, you know it because you see it, but it's not a thing that most really talk about. They'll label it as other things.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting because I don't know if it's the difference in where we're at. It shouldn't be, because I believe kids are wired pretty much the same, whether you're in
mhm,
Pittsburgh or whether you're in Tacoma or Seattle or Los Angeles or wherever. But maybe it's just from my perspective, because I feel like I need to let them know that, yeah, this youth mentor, this chaplain has had his past struggles. And then that seems to get them opened up just a bit, enough for me to jump in to maybe, I don't know if expose is the right word, but it does seem to light a little fuse within them so they can openly discuss it.
mhm. Well, that's kind of what we've always talked about, though, even in the beginning of me, teaching, well, kind of just talking with you about mentorship. All mentorship really is relatability.
Yes. And
All
yes,
it is
you were
transparency.
teaching.
That's all it is. That's all it is. And so a lot of my connections are forged because I'm open about my experiences, because it's really in those experiences that the walls come down in anybody else. And so in any teachable moment with anybody, whoever it is that your audience is, they want to know that they can identify with what you're saying, and they want to know
Right.
why it is they should listen to you. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's
Yes.
kind of like if I'm like, this white Caucasian man with red hair, who I walk in with a suit and a briefcase, and then I'm trying to sit down with you, Cy, and tell you about the things that you should be doing in your life. But I don't look like you. I don't sound like you. I don't identify with anything that you're saying as far as the things that I'm trying to tell you that you should be doing. Nothing is relatable in that. Are you
Right.
going to take the advice of that person? Or are you going to take the advice of somebody who's telling you and sharing with you an experience that was really, really, really hard to overcome, or whatever that may have looked like, and how it
Right.
is that they transpired in growing in that?
Yes.
And then identifying with whatever it is that that individual is actually doing. And so anything that I've really done has come with me sharing first. Like
Sure.
the most work that I've ever been able to really be successful at is, and especially in creating relationships, is the open side of my story, and then what that looks like with what it is that they have that they're unpacking. And so
Absolutely.
it's
Now,
really the
you
key.
for sure. Now, you mentioned your story. So you have that connectability with these young ladies. They obviously, and you're not afraid to share your story because this is Project Resurrection, the podcast. So most of my
Yeah.
guests have had and gone through adversity, but being able to come out and deliver back to the community, being impactful, being that shining beacon of light. What was life like for you prior to becoming a youth mentor? What was life like growing up as young Stace?
What, the short version or the long one?
Whatever
So
you want to
if
do,
I will
whatever your
kind of, I
heart
mean,
desires.
so we'll kind of just recap it because it's
Sure.
there's so many moving parts. There to put it kind of as modestly as I can, there's not much that I haven't been through. But growing up, I had a very, very rocky childhood. So I am the oldest of four of three siblings, four with me included, but I have five half brothers and sisters as
Okay.
well. Don't really know them, but
Gotcha.
all in all, kind of grew up with a lot of dysfunction. So my father was an abusive alcoholic. My mother married way too young, 24-year age gap in that, and so they struggled a lot in their relationship, and so all of the real environmental experience I had was centered on dysfunction, and abuse and alcoholism and things like that. And so at an early age, I was kind of tossed into the majority of the parental fights one way or another. I was the one who had to pick the sides, and I was the
Right.
one who was the mediator. I was the one, I don't know why I was always the center focus of a lot of fights. And so when my parents did decide to reconcile after their big blowout of whatever that may look like, their idea of reconciliation was, well, let's just move. Let's start over, let's move, and then
Okay.
we'll work it out there. And so
Right.
I was a child who moved around more times than I probably can count. Different city, different state, different. It was one of those, I would go to a school and I would make friends, but I wouldn't get too close because I knew at some point I'd be
Gonna
leaving,
move. Yeah.
and so it was
Right.
one of those just succession of just dysfunction. It was just one of those, like, you kind of just go with the flow of whatever it is your parents are. You're at the mercy of your parents at that point. And so always had a motherly spirit though. I was one that really raised my siblings. So that job I've always taken serious when it comes to
Yeah.
the nurturing side. Um, but coming to Washington. So I moved here in 2000. It's the longest I've ever been in one state. So one of the reasons why I've been here this entire time and why it's so home for me is because I don't know what home feels like.
Right.
And so once I got here and I had any kind of couple of years here and I've made friends here and I like
Right.
have solid foundational just roots, I got really comfortable in that because I lived a life of instability and chaos for so long that it was like, I finally get to feel what this is
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so I've kind of just always stuck with this location for that reason. And so lots of different backstories though. So when coming to Washington, I started having friendships and things like that, but still struggling a lot with opening up. A lot of my socialization skills were really, really poor at that
Right.
point. I remember I'd be around like a circle of friends because I never really was like clicked up. A lot of kids like to be clicked up.
Sure.
I was
Right.
always a social butterfly. Like, I'm friends with everybody. I don't care who likes who. I'm gonna do what I want to do. But I was still very, very like, like I remember friends would be like, Stace, laugh. And I'm like, I am. I would be like the quietest, so quiet, like so shy. And I hated who I'd become because I was like this shell of an individual. I just couldn't even be open with your friends, And so I did a lot of things to become this extroverted public speaking person, and it came with a lot of uncomfortable experiences.
Right.
So I did public speaking classes, and I did step team and dance team, and ran for daffodil pageant, and I anything that I could really do to make myself as uncomfortable as possible, because I didn't want to continue being, I had to, because I remember even when I'm doing public speaking class and I'm like, I can't even sleep for like 3 days because I know I got to go in front of my class, and I'm like, oh God, why do I even you know what I mean? Like, my anxiety was that bad. And even now, sometimes I have moments where I have to kind of like mentally talk myself through making sure that I'm like centered in what it is that I'm doing, and that my energy is right, and that I'm not over here like super anxious about it. But all in all, it was definitely its own experience in that, trying to just build up into that. But I mean, touching on, just because a lot of the dysfunction was still going on in the background, right? And so my parents were extremely sheltered. Like, I was extremely sheltered. I mean, so I didn't get to have like the traditional, oh, go and do this and hang out with your friends. I had to lie and go do just different things that I wanted to actually do, because my parents just weren't going for that. But in that, I was still kind of struggling with family. And so at about 12, my mom just stopped liking me. She just didn't like me at all. And she made it very, very clear.
What brought that on?
I don't, I learned at 18 why. I had an inkling why kind of growing up, but a lot of it is I'm my father in a lot of ways. And so I act like him, talk like him, and bullheaded like him, spitfire like him. And she was going through such a rough time with him that when she looked at me, she saw him.
Okay.
And she actually told me when I was 18 that was why, that I acted like my father, and she hated me. And she couldn't even tell me why, but that she just didn't like me, and was very unapologetic about it. And so kind of centering back. And so by default, I mean, even without that, I was always a daddy's girl. Like, that was everything for me. And so even though he had his own issues and struggles, like, I really clung to him, because he was my everything.
Right.
He definitely tried his best to kind of mediate with me and my mom, but a lot of times it just wasn't successful. It was just like I'm going to avoid her, a lot of silent, just no contact, just I'll look at her and that's it. Like, just that kind of thing. But that relationship, it was kind of, there was different dynamics without going into it too much that were really testy for me. And so a lot of my ability with people now, I think, in how it is that I'm able to read, is being able to read my parents when I was younger. You know what I mean? And so I would know my mom was on one, so I would just avoid her. Because I always stay grounded. Any way that I can be grounded, she just ground me. So I was like, oh God, here we are. So I like to read because I was always grounded. But with my dad, difference in energy. So because he was an alcoholic in the way that he was an alcoholic, I would watch sometimes when my dad was too flirty with me, or he'd come in the house and he'd go and give me a hug and a kiss, and then look at my mom and be like, hey, you know what I mean? So I'm watching these dynamics and I'm feeling the energy. And there'd be some times where I just kind of knew to avoid my dad, even because I'm like, the energy is weird right now with you. I don't know. As a kid, I'm not really picking up too much of the why, but it was just the, I don't like the excessive, your hug was a little too long. You want to kiss me on the lips a little too much, that kind of thing. Well, it wasn't until I was 16 that I was actually molested by my father. And it's, as a 16-year-old, you don't really know how to process it, because you feel like, on the one hand, how do you say no to somebody that's like you want to say no, but then because you don't stop it fully, and you're trying to stop it, even with me trying to stop it, it was one of those, well, I feel guilty and I feel like I should have known better. But then it's somebody, so for a long time, I just didn't tell anybody, because I couldn't figure out how to process what had happened. And the hard part is kind of knowing as an adult and trying to retrace those steps, and even we'll kind of get to that, but it's just one of those things, and so getting into that, that broke me. So that moment, it broke me. And so not only did it sever the relationship with my father, it started severing it, but I lost it. So I was doing a lot of things out of my character in high school. I was didn't really, I never had the birds and bees talk. I never had the, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. I never had the sit downs and things like that of what really should be coming with you coming into womanhood and things like that. So I learned the hard way, the hardest way that you could think of. So I, was, sleeping with guys because I thought that was how you show a guy, that you like him. And, that's what you do when somebody likes you. And it was a lot for me to really learn love, and what love should be and the normalcies of what that would look like and should look like. And so kind of moving forward a little bit, it got to be a point where my parents were kind of in this space of, this is shortly after the molestation, but a space of potential divorce. And the divorce was actually my decision. So something that I still carry with me. Yeah.
Your decision. How so?
My decision. So at this point in time, my dad was living in the RV on the side of our house. My mom was in the house and things like that. But he would still call me out to the trailer, you know what I mean? Just to really say, and at this point, I'm already so uncomfortable. I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what this is going to transpire into being, but so I'm kind of on edge at this point. But he would keep me in there just kind of on these drunken rants and want to kind of just talk about things. And so I remember him asking me the question one day of whether or not he thought that my parents should get a divorce. And I said, yes. I said, at the end of the day, knowing what I struggle with as a child and everything you both have dragged me through for my now 17 years of life, don't do that to my siblings. If you do anything for me, spare them. And he wrote out on that decision. He actually, it was maybe a week later, he took me out to Sizzler. I'll never forget it. He stopped me from going in the house. I was driving at that time, and he had me go to Sizzler with him. And he sat me down and he told me that he was leaving my mom. He was also one of those, like, he would tell my siblings I was his favorite. He was that person. Like, I love you guys, but Stacy's my favorite. He would do that. He was totally that guy. And so the damage of what my siblings, have experienced, I can only imagine, because they're not as vocal as me. But he was that father. And so he sat me down and he was like, I will always love you. I will always be here for you. Like, you are my heart, my soul. Just that whole conversation, of letting me know, but then also, promising me the world. And that was actually one of the last times I've ever seen him. So outside of that, when it really hit the fan, the last time I actually saw my father, at this point in time, once I knew the relationship was what it was with my parents and they were potentially talking about divorce, I left. I started staying with one of my friends because my relationship with my mom was horrible. And so I was with my play cousin at that time, and I was over there for maybe 2 weeks. And I get a call from my mother on New Year's. Now, my parents were good for one thing. You always knew when a fight was coming, if it was a birthday or a holiday. You almost can always expect it. I don't know what it is about those days, but trust and believe, any birthday or holiday coming around, they're going to ruin it. Every time. They're going to have a major fight. Holidays will be ruined. Most of the time they'll be in 2 different spaces, and we got to figure out gifts. And sometimes there is no gifts, and it was just a lot. And so, I saw him on New Year's when I got a call from my mom, who was hysterical because he had came over and beat her up in front of the neighbor, and then the neighbor called the cop. And so at that point in my life, there was no balance to my hot-headedness. I was a different beast then. You could tell I was just very, I'm coming over right now with a baseball bat. And I did, you know what I mean? And so it was just a lot of, even the police officer couldn't calm me down. It was I'm when I find him. My mom had to sit me in a car and promise me that I wouldn't do anything to him. And
you had a fiery personality.
Oh, very much. I was on a different level back then. You couldn't tell me anything. You couldn't tell, but I was raised that way. And so, when you're in high school, you have people that are always going to try you and things like that. And I was raised, my dad grew up he taught us all how to box. Boxing was his favorite sport. He made me sit there and fight my brothers. And so, but the rule is you never swing first. But of course, I'm always trying to have somebody swing. You know what I mean? Like, I'll run up on everybody. Like, he was talking shit. But I would not let you give a fair one. But so it was a lot. And so at that point, I was still very much I was a different beast back then.
So Stace, how did your mom and dad's relationship How did that affect your relationship as you moved forward and got a little bit older and as you started dating? You kind of alluded to it that you didn't feel like you were balanced, but how did that manifest itself as you moved along with relationships with guys? Were you trusting of anyone?
No, no. I learned though, but you have to imagine what the lessons came with in learning the hard way. It came with a lot of labeling. It came with a lot of um I don't even want to say self-criticism. I mean, you can say criticism of self, but it was just, I would say honestly, if I had to put it in a term, it took me till I was about I started learning real relationships when I got into my relationship with my son's father at about 19, but I still didn't fully learn the lesson, even though I was monogamous and things like that in that
Okay.
relationship. And for
Right.
6 years, it was just him. But I didn't fully learn the lesson until about 26. It took a long time to undo the mindset created.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Sure.
even though you learn things like just different, well, hopefully you learn, but with the experiences, you kind of have to sit with things to really learn the lesson. And that really, 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 in anything, this is not just for just that, but self-reflection and dissection, I like to call it,
Right.
because you got to sit with it. You have to sit with it and you have to really think about it and you have to pick it apart layer by layer and then put it back together the
Right.
way that it should be put together. You know what I mean? And so usually for me, because I was a product of a dysfunctional childhood, I have to self-isolate to go within myself, and it
Right.
takes me some time. So I'll check out from everybody. My friends have kind of learned now at this point, like when I fall off the face of the earth, they kind of know what's going on. Like I'll come back when I'm ready, type of thing. And usually it could be a couple weeks, it could be a couple months. I just whatever I have to do to get myself where I feel like I understand. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so I've picked myself apart a couple times. But
What
touching
were
back
you
on the
well, what were
question
you
that you
looking
asked.
for? What were you looking for at that time in relationships? What was your going into it? What was your expectations
As far as what in what phase?
as far as dating a guy? What were you
And
looking?
originally,
Yeah.
or originally it was more so I was seeking validation and love. You know what I
Okay.
mean? I
Okay.
was seeking for somebody else to give me what I didn't know I needed to give myself
Got it.
all
Okay.
along. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so I'm seeking for other people to make me feel good about myself. And so that's kind of why when I say, the whole piece with my dad and things like that, how it just was a switch. It was
Right.
just one of those, like, because that relationship was severed in that way, and I didn't ever know how it was supposed to normally feel when somebody does genuinely love you. I was seeking that love that was broken in my relationship with my father and other
Right.
individuals. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, so a lot of that was just going about it in a way where I'm really trying to feel what that should feel like. But then obviously the deficit is being created because
Right.
everybody is doing the opposite and then digging you deeper in the ditch. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
Right. Exactly.
yeah, so it's just a lot of different pieces of my childhood and things like that. But kind of just to go back full circle and just end with where I'm at. Well, what transpired in that? And so I've already kind of touched on the fact that when I was 18, I sat down with my mom and we had that discussion.
Right.
But even with, our relationship, it got to be a point where we had a fist fight one time, just about, yeah, it really got to that. It wasn't a fight that I provoked it. I
Did you?
did. I can't say that I didn't. Yeah, for sure. I didn't intentionally think that she was going to fight me though, but she did. And
Did she
so,
fight you?
and I
So she
didn't,
fought you.
she fought me. Yeah. I didn't let her, I really didn't do what I would normally do to somebody else to
Right.
her, because I would never, but enough, you know what I mean? To where I had to kind of go back and apologize about that one. But
Okay.
um that relationship was severed. She was on a first name basis until I was about 30.
Wow.
We didn't have any relationship.
Yeah.
She was Kathy. We did not speak.
Really, Stacy.
Yeah, we wouldn't, if I was around her from like my brothers or something, we would be cordial, but it was never a relationship. And so it wasn't until 30. So even even with my father, on that New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, with when I was 17 being the last time I saw him, that was the last time I even spoke to him. So that whole time, there was nothing. There was no communication. He just disappeared. He was
Have you
gone.
since spoken to him at all, or no? You still haven't?
Once.
Okay. Okay.
So in this phase, when I hit about 30, so really I would say probably 30, 31, I think I was going into my 31st birthday. I was in this phase of my life where I had one of those like God moments is all I can really call it. And you know how different things you'll read or you'll watch will kind of be triggering to something else. You know what I mean? And so,
Sure.
Very long story short, my god brother, he had sent me a video one time, and it's always stuck with me since. You know, just some of those things that you just get a hold of, and it just never leaves you. He sent me this video, and it was of a man who was sharing his experience of him wanting to know what heaven was like. And he was that's all he would pray for. That's all. And his wife was kind of in the back, you know, doing the side interview, and was like, yeah, I mean, that's all he was like. He was just obsessed with it. Like all he wanted to do was get to experience what heaven was going to be like, and just know what it was going to be like, you know, being able to be up there, you know, on Judgment Day and da da da. Well, he describes his experience one day as going to sleep and being in that moment and it feeling very, very real. And he's sitting here, and he's in this line, and he's at the gates, and he's watching all of these individuals before him and behind him and things like that. And they all have different seeds, just different numbers of seeds. So they're like a silhouette of a person, but you see the seeds around their heart. And he's like some people would have 2, some people would have 20. Every person had a different amount of seeds. And so he's sitting in the line, and he's like, well, this is a really long line. Like, what's going on? I'll be here forever. And all he's hearing is, shoot, I do not know you, depart from me. Shoot. And all of a sudden the line is just going really fast, and he's starting to get anxious, and he's like, oh my God, like a lot of people, I've heard the shoot, like the majority of you guys. And so he's stressed out, and he gets to the front of the line, and he's like, God, like, what's the seeds? And he's like, those are all the people in your life that you didn't forgive. Those are all of the people that you had experiences with that you didn't forgive in your life, and now you've carried that, and now we're here. And that was one of the tasks, was to forgive in those. So it's the seeds that you've carried. And so at that moment, it was something about the video that just really resonated. And so in that, it was like a moment where I was like, oh my God, I need to forgive everybody. You know what I mean? Like, because for me, I realized in that moment that the seeds are chains.
Right.
It's literally things that you don't realize, or maybe you do, but most of the time it's subconscious, that are weighing you down in anything that you're doing in life, and you're carrying those into all your other experiences. And those are things that, you know, once I really started getting into it, and I'm diving into every layer by layer. My mom was a first touch. You know, I went back and I had another conversation with her of, okay, well, because I was in that mindset for so long, you know, I felt the need to have a mom, and she wasn't the mom for me. She knew who she should have been for me, but she wasn't. And so I kept holding this grudge over her of you should have given this to me, and you know you should have been the one, and really rightfully so, needed to be the one that came to me and fix this relationship. But I had to realize that she wasn't strong. She's never been as strong as I am.
Right.
And so once I realized that, I had to sit with myself on that, and then really be the one that came first, and really was like, okay, like, let me figure out how I can play a part in what this relationship would look like, you know. And that was the first step of forgiveness with her, you know. And so, and it didn't stick the first time around. We kind of fell off, and then I came back around and I did it again. And now we have, at 35, it's taken, these last 2 years have been astronomically different. I have the mom that I've never had in my entire life.
Blessing. So, what a blessing, Stacy.
Yeah, it's been different, you know, but it's one of those things. And so I did the same thing with my father. So ironically, I don't believe in coincidences, but my cousin around that time, I really don't have relationships with my family, anybody. I have hundreds of relatives that I know of because I've been to different family reunions when I was younger, but my father did a very good job of isolating all of us. If he had a problem with the family, we were all cut off from the family. And so I have lots of relatives, and I have no relationship with any of them. But a
Yeah.
few of them I have on my social media, just from like, oh my gosh, she has the same last name as me, or I know that's my cousin. Let me, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so, my cousin reached out and she was like, hey, funny story, your dad is trying to reach out to you guys, and I'm like,
Okay.
you know, and it was my brother got the call as well, and I'm the oldest, and I've always been the leader of them. And so they're
Right.
like,
Yes,
leader for better
absolutely.
lack of words. And so I'm telling them kind of like what's going on. I'm like, well, Stace, they said the same thing. You're the guinea pig. You go first and maybe we'll consider it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because at this point, they're just so over him too. Like he did the
Sure.
same
Sure.
thing to them and things like that. And so I worked up the courage to give him a call, and took about 2 weeks. I sat with it for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I called him, and the phone conversation lasted 30 seconds.
That was it. You feel like
I mean,
how much work got done in that 30 seconds?
if I'm being, if I was to give it more realistic sense, I would say maybe a minute and a half, but I don't
Okay.
even think it lasted that long. So when I called him first, he didn't realize who it was. And so he hung up on me because I was like, Joseph. And so then when I called him back, I was like, Dad. And he was like, oh my God, Stace. And so I initially was like, so I heard you, you were trying to reach out, and he immediately cut me off, and he's like,
Right.
nope, that's not how that happened. It's not how that happened at all. I wasn't trying to reach out to you. Your cousin said that you were trying to reach out to me. And I'm like, so you weren't trying to actually reach out to anybody?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he was like, no, I'm not, that wasn't my intention. But,
Okay.
and I said, so after all this time, you don't have anything that you want to say to me?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, nope. And if it's all the same, you have a nice life, Stace.
Oh, wow, Stace.
Exactly what he told me. And of course I got off the call and I'm bawling. I'm like, that cry that you can't even breathe, and so I sat with that for about an hour, and then I worked up the courage and I wrote everything out that I had to say in a text.
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, sometimes in that moment, I learned that sometimes closure isn't what you think closure is going to be.
Right.
So it wasn't until that I sent that text did I feel the weight lift, because I said what I had to say. It didn't matter if he responded or how he received it.
Sure.
I had to say my piece, and that was my piece.
Right.
And so that forgiveness went to everybody, though. I forgave a girl who I beat up. Like,
oh, you forgave her.
I did. I was like, oh, we're gonna be friends now. Cool, we can be friends.
You whooped her butt and then forgave her. Good. Very good.
Well, she had reached out to me, and I was like, well, she had like, long story short, but it was one of those like, you tried to sleep with my man and you did, and I caught you one day, not physically, but like caught up with you, and then she wanted to be my friend, and I was like, for what? And like, but it was one of those, don't do that, Stace, don't. And we're still friends to this day. Like, but it was one of those things where I had to get to a point where I didn't want to wear any of the chains anymore.
And that's such a good analogy with the seeds and the chains. Do you feel like you got an empty plate right now? You feel like you've cleared all those things off your plate, or is there still things to do?
No, with the forgiveness piece, I pride myself in where I've come in that, and knowing the different mindset that it puts you in when you do it. I wouldn't be able to operate freely in the magnitude of which I do without it. Yeah. Because it'd be a hindrance to my soul, and it will be something that sits on my soul, because I feel all of those things. It's one of those nagging little just, and then it's always, even if nobody else like recognize, it's just one of those, for what? Why would I want to sit with that when I don't have to? You know what I mean? And so it's one of the reasons why I'm very transparent in everything that I do. I'm very vocal. I'm very, this is how this is for me, but I'm also very careful of my words. So I make sure when I'm saying anything that it's thought out and I'm taking into account somebody else's perspective. And that's really hard to do too for most people. But in this line of work, especially, but in being really an influential person, you have to be able to know how to free your spirit.
Right. And I'm sure the young people who you mentor appreciate that. I mean, again, we talk about that connectivity, that they hear what you've gone through and how you've come through this. And you have obviously come through this a much more stronger, spiritually stronger, mentally stronger, physically, because I've seen you work out. I mean, you've got all the tears that are required. And it's the same. I think maybe that's why you and I are kind of kindred spirits. Our situations certainly are different, but the fact that we have battled and overcome and been able to get out of that proverbial storm and see some sunlight, I think you wear it well. And I'm pretty sure that your kids I hope they're grateful for who they have in their midst, because you're a very special individual. And I've always been adamant in telling you that. I don't want to get your head too big, first of all.
This big old thing.
But no,
thank you though.
And you know, and maybe our listeners don't know that I call you my soul friend. And I don't want folks to get that twisted in meaning like a soulmate, because I know you said I'm too old and everything. You said I'm an old minister, and you don't.
I never said.
I'm just joking.
First of all, you're a liar. You're a liar, because I don't even identify with the word old. We know that. Anytime I've ever, what do I say?
I know.
Seasoned.
Yes,
you're seasoned.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Because old is not a term that I will ever identify with.
I was impressed with that. But when I was going through. Well, first of all, when I got my DUI March 1st, and I just crossed over my 2-year sobriety, I told you that I was so disappointed, and I let myself down. But I remember when I went back to 24-Hour Fitness, which is a gym in Puyallup, Washington, where you worked out at, and Brian and I and a couple of our other friends, that you were in the backside of the gym. And it was almost like God was picking me up and sending me over to talk to you, because I really wanted to get that off of my chest, because I was so disappointed. I remember telling you that I had gotten a DUI and I had too much to drink. And you've seen me put away some liquor. But you looked at me, Stacy, and you never judged. And you told me, look, I got my own things that we would talk about at some point. But you uplifted me instead of being judgmental and breaking me down. And I was expecting to get broken down, but you actually surprised me. And then the pandemic hit, and then I was just kind of getting to know you. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, wow, I won't see her again because the gym is shut down. And God was working. He had Brian Fath put the weights in the garage at the 4105 Crystal Ridge, and you started working out there, and we started talking, and I shared my story with you, and then you ultimately shared your story with me. You watched me go from a drinker to sobriety. You watched me pick up the Bible. You watched me go through seminary training. And when I was doing my chaplaincy training, we were going through the grief process, which was hard, going through that and learning how to minister to people and dealing with the stages of grief. It said, you need a soul friend. Now, I had pastoral mentors, but I needed someone that I can unload on. And that person was you. And I remember pointing that in my homework. I said, I can check this box off. I know Stacy Lollis. She's the bomb. When I got things to unload, you always listen. And that's how our journey began. And I've always told you that how appreciative I am on that. And I always thought that you and I would have a mentorship program together. I don't know if we're destined to do that, but I know that you're basically doing the same thing out there that I'm doing here, is that we are stewards of God in our community. And you were just slaying that, sister. You were slaying that.
But that's a mutual appreciation and feeling. So that's one of those things, even watching your journey, because you touched on a lot of it, but outsider looking in, because I got to thankfully and just, graciously get to watch the transition from start to where we are now. And yes. So, having the subtle conversations and, when I'm in the bar field and then even in the gym and things like that. But God is always interesting in how he works. You know what I mean? And so I remember even the day that you came and talked to me, and you never really had a conversation really like super deep like that. We'd have conversations, but not like, hey, like I really feel like I want to tell you something that's personal. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
just kind of the God moment in that, but the blessing then in watching what God did with that seed and what God did with just the levels that you've really worked into, and I've always told you, it's one of those things, God is going to use you for how he feels, but it's on you to figure that out. And so even
Sure.
when we're talking,
Yeah.
you're like, well, Stace, I don't, and I love you to pieces, but you are the most analytical and critical person that I know.
Right.
You will beat yourself down more than anybody. And it's just, but it's the beauty in watching what you're doing with the gifts that God has given you. You know what I mean? And then really honoring where it is in the phases of your life that you're at,
Right. Yeah.
and it's not, it's just one of those things you have to figure it out for yourself. So even when
Sure.
it came to the school, and then you're like, well, I don't know, Stacey, I feel like it's, it's just something different. And I'm like, well, then it probably is. And
Yes.
then, you know what I
Yes.
mean? And then you're like, well, I feel like I want to do this. Well, then you should, And so,
Absolutely.
and then you follow the call on everything. It's always been follow the call, Si. You know what I
Well,
mean? Even when
it,
you're uncertain. And I think that's been the
yes.
biggest challenge for you, but it's been the most gratifying to watch is you love to know what you're walking into and what the steps are going to be. And God has given you none of that.
Right.
He's given
No, he's
you that you're going to walk in faith on everything that I've told you to do. Follow the call anyway,
yes.
And so
Absolutely.
in that, it's been so rewarding in itself to just really see. And every time we connect to hear what it is you're doing next and what's going
Right.
on now and what
Yeah.
fuel's over here lighting this fire. And so it's such a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I know that it
Absolutely.
came with a lot of hard experiences, but
Thank
that's what
you.
makes it
Thank
that
you.
much more beneficial, is just knowing that it's sometimes you feel like this chips are up against you, but you learned how to not be a victim and become a victor.
Right.
And that's the key in anything in growth. You have a choice. You could either be the victim, because rightfully so, you could be, or you can be the victor,
Sure.
where you've overcome everything that you've really experienced, because it really came with those real dark times is an understatement moments, you know what I mean?
Yes. Absolutely.
But then
For
turning it
sure.
into what it is now, and then being a light to others and what it is that, the experience that you went through, that you can identify with them in, so
Absolutely. No, I
it's
appreciate that.
yeah, it's
I
just the
do.
truth. And I tell you this all the time, you know what I mean? And so, but it's always so inspiring watching
I
the growth
appreciate
in
that.
you.
Now, I can't let you go until, no, I got to ask you, how's your autobiography going? Are you still writing?
uh,
Oh, no,
I
no,
don't have
please
the time
don't.
to write right now. Like, I have
Okay.
so much
Understood.
on my plate right now. I'm big on gotta make sure I have the time when I have the time. And
Right.
I have to be okay with the fact that right now I don't have the time, because there's so many other things. Now, it doesn't mean the book isn't important. I'm at chapter 5 now, and so it's still a
Okay.
very
Okay.
important piece. But
Right.
even kind of touching back on the book, I think we talked about this a little bit, but when I wrote the outline for that book, God led, something told me to write an outline for the book. And I didn't just do it like, oh, keyword here. I went and I wrote a 16-page outline with a lot of detail in it, and then I put it away for 9 years. I didn't even touch it.
Right.
And then something told, like, it was just nagging at me. I don't know what
Right.
it is. I'm very just, and so it's like, you need to pick that book up. And I'm like, no, you need to pick that book up. And I'm like,
No.
So one day I'm like, let me just find, where is this book at? And I opened the first page and I'm like, dear God, 75% of those experiences I forgot about, I blocked away, and it's interesting in moments like that where you realize where you come from,
I feel
because
you.
it really did.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to learn love. Like, I went through the autobiographies based on a book where I did almost lose my life, and in one of
Right.
two ways: I should really be in federal prison, or I should really be dead. But God, and so in that book, it's still coming, and I feel like my time is going to be more in the summer when things have kind of slowed down.
Good.
That's a
Good.
lie. The kids are advocating for me to have a summer group,
And I
so
was
I
talking
don't
about
know.
good,
We're
like I'm
working it
agreeing
out.
with
We're
you.
working it
Yeah.
out.
I'm
But a
glad you
lot of that
said
is
it.
them. I'm trying though, and so for me
Right.
right now, though, in this physical moment, I'm coming off of the back end of mommy mode. My son plays two
Right.
different basketball teams, middle school and AAU, and then
How's he
I'm in the
doing?
process of he's coming into it. So
Is it good?
he gets
Good. Good
mad
for
when I
him.
call him D with the D, because Donovan's defense is like so solid. But right now we're working on taking the opportunities and taking the shots and not being
Good.
afraid to
Right.
miss, because so a lot of everything is teachable moments. Even
Good.
when he thinks I'm just talking about basketball, he'll learn, because he just thinks it's mom. Mom always goes hard. Like, you'll understand all these things that I'm saying when it
He
comes to
will.
that. But so in that, then it's building this platform for the mentorship program, because ideally I'd like to have it to be where once it becomes, once God gives me the opportunity of having this be a real position that I've created in the school, the idea is in that paid position of what will be, I want to have a lot of the girls who've graduated and who have been in the program be able to be mentors, because I've had a lot of them graduate and come back and say, Stace, I really want to mentor. I had a girl, one of my grads,
That's
her name is Stacy,
beautiful.
came back last week to group, and she's like, I really want to come. I saw you were on your story and you were at the school, and can I come? And she walked in the door with her journal. Now, I haven't even talked about journaling, and she had this beat up journal, boy, because I always, once I start to really cultivate these relationships, I have them start a journal, even if it's shared or not. But she walked in with it, and just hearing her experiences and with her, in that mindset of, I really want to do what you do. And I just, I just want that to be now when we're in this, because all it is all of these roles, you really ideally want, you can't, it's not a one person show. I can't do this realistically at every school and then have it all who better to have be the next in line than youth leading change, you know what I mean? Than people who have been in the program, that know how the program run and can take it with their own experience and run with it, you know? And so that's my goal. That's my goal, is to really to start, because it's all the web, right? That's all really anything is the web you're creating. Because I used to be in the mindset of, oh my God, and I still kind of am when I have to catch myself, but it's like, you want to do all these things and you want to be so impactful and you want to just, I want to change the world and I want to just, and then you get bogged down because you're like, I'm not really doing anything. Like, what's not really helping? And what is this? Like, I'm really helped. Like, I could count on one hand or two hands. Like, and so I had a friend one day. He will never understand the gem that he gave me in that. Now, my brother too, actually, they both really just in my broken moments of like feeling like I just wasn't doing enough, because you get in those mindsets. You just feel like, and I know I'm doing all these things, but I'm just not doing enough. And they were like, but you don't understand what you're doing, like at the end of the day, you in the circle that you're impacting, it's a web, right? So you're teaching me and you're coaching me and you're giving me life, but you're not realizing that I've taken what you've given me and I've given it to my sons. And then I've given it to my friend, and now they've given it to their friend, and then the web is, you're not going to see it. And so I had to be comfortable and identify with the fact and the thought of, and this is really what I base it all off of, all of this, you'll probably never see the fruits of what it is that you're really doing.
Right.
Your job is to plant the seed.
Absolutely.
You'll probably never know what it is that you're doing, but plant the seed anyway, you know what I mean? And know that at the end of the day, whatever it is you're giving to those that you're giving, and whatever it is that they're learning, they're going to take that and they're going to start to
keep
to
moving
move with what it is that you, and so you're probably never going to know what you've really done, but do what you are destined and designed to do and let God figure all that out. And so once I figured that out, that was key for me, because I am a person who I would just wake up every day like, and it's not a morbid thought, but I think a lot about my eulogy, not for the fact that I'm worried about death or anything. I'm comfortable in the thought, but I always think about, what would anybody say when I died? What did my life matter? What would they say? What did I do here? And that's always the perpetuating thought. But that was the thought that kind of calmed my spirit. That was the conversation that calmed my spirit, was, you will never know. Do it anyway.
For sure.
And so
absolutely, you continue to plant the seeds because folks are drawn to you. I mean, they're drawn to that spiritual light that you have, and it's illuminated, and it's again, it's like a light, it's like a lighthouse on the shore looking for those lost vessels that are out to sea, like me. And so you have to keep that, and your legacy will live on. And the fact that these young women want to mentor because of you, that's a blessing. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. That's a sign that you're doing what God has you purpose to do.
Yeah.
And you keep that up.
Thank you.
And thank you. No, Stacy, thanks for opening up. There's more. This should be maybe a 2 or 3 parter, because you got a lot going on. But I think we touched it. We covered a lot of ground.
I'm like, oh man.
I know.
There's so many limits. I tried to speed it up too. Like,
I know you did. I know. We'll have to make this into a 2-parter, but I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And I know you've got a lot going on, but I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for being my soul friend. I hope you continue to be, as I know you will.
Always.
And
Always.
good luck. I know whenever you get to the autobiography, I know it will be a bestseller. But again, I can't, it's like preaching to the choir because I'm not where I want to be on my book as well. But I think we're on the right track. You
Well, I
agree?
don't think I know we're on the right track. And it's one of those, God will work it out when the timing is right. It's kind of the
Yes.
same thing with the documentary, excuse me,
Yes.
for you. It's not that the time isn't going to come. It's that maybe other things need to take precedence as we build into those. Even with the
Exactly.
book, I look at it as a
Yeah.
in anything in life. I don't even care if it's right now the fact that my son is waving his homework at me. Everything it has a purpose, right? And so
Right.
everything
Right.
down to the smallest of, you missed the light. Well, you don't know, at the next light, if there was a car that was going to hit
Yeah.
you, you know what I mean? And so it's one of those things, everything has purpose. I don't think for some reason the book is meant to be published right this second.
Right.
I think the bigger picture for me, because even with the curriculum and things like that, I need to figure out how to get that published and
Sure.
things
Sure.
like that. And so a lot of different moving parts with what it is that I think. And so I think one of the biggest things, and this is one of the things I teach you all the time, is be comfortable in the process and not knowing, but know that somewhere in there, God's going to work it out,
Right.
And so
Yes. Absolutely.
learning how to, just learning how to take some things to a back. And it's not to say that it doesn't hold the same importance. It's to say that maybe for some reason the resistance, if there's a lot of resistance for me, I've learned, take it as a sign, you know what I
Right.
mean? Because for some reason there's a prolonging for a reason. And so it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen and come into fruition. I know it will. And I know
Yes.
when it does, it will be exactly when it needs to be. But right now, I
Yeah.
think the building of the foundation and the timing of when the school wanted me, because that's all. I don't think anything's a coincidence. And so I'm just making sure that everything that I'm giving in what I have is 100%. And so I know that you really can't give it 100% to everything. But
True.
if you knew how much work that I actually did, I don't tell
Yeah.
anybody how much I really work. You know what I
Oh, I
mean?
know.
I
I
really
know.
don't. I really don't. Because I don't want them to be like, what? You don't have any? I don't really have any
Oh,
free time.
that's,
I
yeah.
have, my free time is, oh, let me go on the market and see what's going on with the market and houses because I have an hour to myself. It's
Right. Yeah.
always something that's going on. And so same thing with the things we talked about with you. I know it's coming,
It will. And I just, again, I've got to
it'll be
trust the
when it
process, as you tell me.
mhm.
And I am. I think I'm
Every
getting a little
time.
bit, I'm getting a little bit better. I'm listening. I try. I'm
Are,
listening. Oh,
are you?
oh, now here you go. I am. I
I'm
promise you.
just joking.
I
Okay.
am.
I just honest moment
I
because
am.
I have to
Yeah,
make
it
sure I
is.
check on
I
my
know.
friends. Okay.
Okay. This is the guest calling me out, folks. Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
This is what friends
This,
do though.
you are absolutely right.
So
You are
at the
absolutely
end of the
right.
day, when you know your friends, you want to make
Yes,
sure that you're given the support that's needed. Because I get it,
absolutely.
we all have our things. And so,
Of
but it's a
course.
blessing, it's one of those, you really do. You overcome through adversity and through not knowing direction, even though
I
that's the
know.
biggest thing that you want to know.
Oh,
And you still push through anyway. And so
it's
that's
like I'm
that's the
I'm
beauty in
piloting
it.
a plane. I'm flying a plane blind with blinders on. I can't see anything. And I'm
But
trusting that
yet,
I'm going to get
but
this plane
yet,
through.
and yet here we are flying
Yes.
smoothly as
Yes, we
can
are. I
be.
think
So
so.
that's
I
the
think
thing.
so.
You're doing a fantastic job.
Well,
I'm
thank
really,
you. And
really proud of
back
you.
at
Even the
you.
fact that I'm on your podcast, this is
I
crazy. I'm
know.
like,
What
you
a
got
blessing,
a
Stace.
podcast. Yes.
I'm so happy. And again, I
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. Ladies and
Always.
gentlemen, my guest, the incomparable, how you like that? Incomparable, Miss Stacy
Oh
Lollis.
my God, stop it.
Thank
Thank
you. I
you though.
appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank
Absolutely.
you for having me.
I'll have you back on. Promise you'll come back on at some point.
I definitely will. We'll
Cool.
we'll figure out how that works in your schedule, and things like that. But we'll touch back on this at some
Yes,
point
we
when
will. Yes, we
when
will.
when you're ready.
All right,
All
Stace.
right.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's
Project
definitely a blessing.
Resurrection, the
Yeah,
podcast,
the
Stacy Lollis.
podcast.
Look for her. She is going to be on a big platform. Hey, this is almost like A Star is Born. I'm Chris Christopherson, and you're the Barbara Streisand.
Wow. Hey, Barbara, I get to be
Absolutely.
Barb. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And scene. All
There
right.
you go. Thanks for coming on, Stacy. I appreciate you.
Yes. Thank
All
you,
right.
Cy.
Much
Thank you,
love,
Cy.
baby. All right.
Love to you too.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks, Stacy.